All right, don't worry.
Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Knight. With me today, I've got Guy Rubin, and we're going to be talking about Guy's research, which is a new benchmark report on the state of GTM, go-to-market in 2026. I've had you on before, Guy, and I'm really excited to talk to you today because it's always fun and it's always insightful. Guy, where can people find you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back, Tim. Always enjoy our conversations. Yes,
always entertaining, Guy.
Absolutely. Well, while I'm in San Francisco today, normally I spend my life I'm based in London. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on LinkedIn. And if you are interested in, I'm always interested in conversations around anything to do with data and sales. So please reach out if you have similar, if you're similarly enthusiastic in those topics.
Excellent. So, Guy, first question. The report starts with a jarring statistic. Sales efficiency fell by 28% year over year. You mentioned that the playbooks that once rewarded volume and heroics are breaking down. Why is activity alone no longer enough to drive pipeline growth in 2026?
Well, we saw some pretty dramatic changes in go-to-market last year. So the report that you mentioned, it's the fourth time we've done this report in conjunction with Pavilion. This year, we had the broadest data set that we've ever had. So we analysed data from 316 different companies that were engaged in this process, and we also interviewed over 250 CROs as well. So what we're seeing from the data is really an emergence of two AI universes appearing. We're seeing that there's the organizations that have had a lot of organizations, probably the majority, are using AI to try and address their top of funnel challenges. So they're trying to generate more and more opportunities. And we saw on average across the market an increase in top of funnel opportunity creation of 68% in a single year, which is huge. We've never seen anything like that before.
Yes.
But for organizations that have got these, that are using AI just to generate this infinite volume of leads, the challenge, of course, is that the vast majority of those leads don't match ICP. And so if you've got a system, if you haven't invested in systems and process, then what you've got is this huge volume coming in at the top of funnel. And the only way to deal with that is probably hiring a lot more sellers to do that, to manage through that. And of course, when you look at the data, we find that actually the revenue per seller plummeted by 25%. Because people are just inundated with these volumes. And ultimately, when you're too busy, number one, the opportunities that they're working on aren't the type of opportunities they really should be spending their time on. But moreover, when they're too busy, they're not deep. They're not as multi-threaded as they should be. They're not asking the difficult questions. They're not engaging with their prospects at the depth that they would do if they had a more balanced pipeline. And all of that kind of compounds, and we saw and led to the sales efficiency data point. But if we jump into it in a bit more detail, what we see is that deal values actually dropped for those organizations by about 11%. We saw win rates go down by about 13%, and the average sales cycle grew by about 7%. And when you put that into the efficiency calculator, that leads to a 28% reduction in sales efficiency. Or another way of thinking about it is the dollars per day that your sellers are able to generate from the opportunities that they're working on.
Yeah, the data shows a massive split in how companies use AI. One group saw a 61% increase in revenue per seller, while they also saw the 26% decline. What's the fundamental difference between AI efficiency strategy and an AI volume strategy?
No, I'm pleased you asked. And that's really what we're seeing. So those that are using AI to introduce rigor and process and consistency are able to run sales processes at a much more efficient pace. They've gone up market, their average deal values have gone up. They actually closed slightly less deals, but the revenue per seller, as you say, jumped up dramatically. And that's the hard work, right? Using AI to introduce system and process and be a lot more consistent in effectively replicating what our top performers are doing across our B players. Okay, and we can use AI now to really ensure that and to make sure that we don't leave a certain stage until certain stakeholders are actively engaged, or we've dealt with certain objections, or we've got them qualified beyond a certain line. The problem is that most organizations don't have that rigor, and instead what they're doing is they've got a broken system that was never really efficient in the first place, allowing sellers to do pretty much whatever they wanted. And then what we've got is people affecting that by exacerbating that problem by throwing a lot more fuel on the fire and just working on all sorts of
because what I see from your is you're using AI, but you're increasing the number of leads. So what's happening is that the salespeople, of course, you throw them a lead, they'll go and work on it. But because they've got too much to do, they're not focused on actually doing the right thing, which is, you mentioned that most people now know that the average buyer group is 10 to 12 people. So how do you build relationships with all those 10 to 12 people, have conversations with them? You can't do that if you've got lots of deal volume. So what happens is that the number of leads goes up, but the actual close rate comes down.
Yeah, 100%. We see territory planning is now more important than ever before, and making sure that you don't have too much volume on a specific territory really helps to solve that problem. But when sellers have got too many opportunities to work on, as you say, they're just not as multi-threaded as they were. They've got surface level relationships rather than deeper ones, and it falls all the way through to the outcomes. We're seeing a lot less wins because they're just being busy fools rather than actually thinking about it and doing things in the right way.
That was the first thing I thought was busy fools. Yeah. Most sales leaders instinctively want a bigger pipeline, but your research shows that overloaded reps close at only 0.8 win rates, while balanced ones hit 1.3x. Why does too much pipeline actually erode execution and enterprise value?
Well, as we said before, it really comes down to this fact that the sellers aren't very good at managing their time. So all of these challenges that we're talking through are leadership problems rather than individual contributor problems. It's our role as leaders to give our sellers the structure, process, and rigor to make sure that they are working on the right opportunities, they're qualifying out the deals that don't match their criteria, and that they don't allow the sellers just to rattle through the early stages of a sales process. Because while it might look good to see opportunities progressing through the later stages, when you get to those later stages, we see a lot of deal slippage. We see deals falling out of bed when we've ended up investing a lot more energy and time in them, maybe by bringing in solution engineers and support resources to try and even legal and so on, when in fact the deal's just not ready to close. Yeah. So it really comes down to, and one of the things I've learned a lot this year was as Ebster's been acquired by Fullcast and they're in the territory planning space, I've had the opportunity to really dive into the data around territories and balancing territories and so on. And it's not an easy task, especially if you've got a large sales function, which is why technology can really help, and AI can help you model out, well, what if we move the territories this way, or put sellers on in different ways, in different groups and categories. And the old way of just breaking territories up by geography, for example, doesn't necessarily play to sellers' skill sets, right? We want to be making sure that we're routing the right opportunities to the right sellers that are going to give them the best opportunity to win.
Could you actually say that, don't you, in the research, in terms of what you need to be doing is actually working out which leads work best with each salesperson, rather than just saying it begins with an A, therefore we give it to Tim because he looks after all the A accounts.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and we see that everywhere. And if you're still, the great thing about AI is if you can funnel all the data into it, it'll tell you what Tim needs to work on. It'll tell you where Tim gets the best conversion rates. Yeah, look, we see it across the funnel. Not only are people still distributing their leads through a kind of round robin model, but when it comes to forecasting, they are still forecasting based on stage. And just because a seller put a deal in a particular stage has no relation or bearing on the likelihood of that deal closing. Yeah. Other data points have much more influence on that win rate, and these are the data points you should be leaning into if you're trying to get to an accurate forecast.
So as AI automates 79% of administrative tasks, you found that human relationships are becoming more critical, not less. With buying communities now reaching 10 to 15 stakeholders, how can AI help a human seller navigate that complexity?
Well, unsurprisingly, right, while everything is changing at the moment with AI, actually nothing's changed, right? Relationships still drive revenue. And what we need to be doing is using our expensive resources, our sellers, and getting them spending more of their time customer facing.
Yeah.
And we see it in the data, right, that the top performers are spending over half of their time customer facing, while our B players are on average are only doing it 2 hours a day. So it's really important that we use AI to free up our sellers' time so that they can spend more time customer facing and more time engaging with our prospects.
Okay, good. A shocking 63% of CROs have little to no confidence in their ICP. How can you explain the priority gap index, you call it the PGI, and why so many teams are starving their high converting segments while over indexing on low return ones?
Well, look, I think ICP definition is a living, breathing document. It's something that has all sorts of signals that can influence it. And so it's not just about a sector or a size of customer that you're trying to sell to. You want to be looking into things like, where are they at the board? Who's controlling the business? Are they about to sell? Have they just raised money? Have they got activist investors on the board? Are they who's running the business? But also, and so businesses should be able to fall into and out of ICP as you go through the sales process, as you find out more information about the customer. Knowing that the VP of sales has just joined, it has and he'll have a very different view on things versus dealing with a VP of sales that's been in seat for 5 years. Different priorities, different sacred cows that they don't want to touch. And so all of these things, as you get that knowledge, should influence ICP. The problem we're seeing is that ICP, for 2/3 of CROs, it's a document or a process they reviewed a year ago. And they never really revisited it. So and we see it in the data when the pipeline, when 1/3 of the pipeline matches ICP, your average deal values are higher, your win rates are higher, your times to close are shorter. When you're down to kind of single digits of your pipeline matching true ICP, then obviously all of those data points start to diminish.
Yeah.
So keeping on top of that and using every deal closed, won, and lost to influence that navigational point around ICP definition is a great way of understanding what's working and what's not. And again, AI can do a lot of that work for you.
Yeah, we've asked a number of people to send us, do you have your ICP defined? Yes. Can you send it to us? No, it's in our heads. Okay, right. So,
and you can guarantee it's slightly different in everybody's head.
Exactly. Yes. Guy will have a different view to Tim. Yeah, I know. The report shows that routing deals based on expertise can swing a rep's win rate from single digits to over 40%. Why is the traditional round robin model costing companies twice, once in the lost deal and again in the missed opportunity?
Well, it's really simple. We want to be routing the right deals to the right sellers. And if you have experience of selling to a particular market or geography or a particular size of business, the chances are that seller is able to talk confidently using the language that the buyers are interested in hearing. And if you funnel that opportunity to the wrong person, then we can see that the win rates differ wildly. So again, it's a really good opportunity to use AI to do the analysis, figure out who's good at selling and closing particular types of deals. And let's play to their strengths and make sure that we're routing the right deals to the right customers, to the right sellers.
You found that lost deals consume 2x more selling days than winners. At what point does a stalled deal become a sunk cost, and how should managers use orchestration to redirect that capacity?
So we see it all the time, right? The time it takes to close a lost deal versus a won deal is at least 2 times. Sometimes it can be 3 or 4 times longer. Again, there are other signals we can listen into, and the problem is that if the seller hasn't got enough pipeline, they'll hold on to deals for far too long, and all that does is it exacerbates the problem. So our job as leaders is to help them understand why they should be closing these deals off as lost to focus on something more productive. Because ultimately we all want the same outcome, right? We all want to earn more money, we all want to close more deals and hit our number. So signals that are really powerful are things like engagement scoring. So when we at Ebster, we kind of got famous because of this ability to score momentum or engagement by monitoring things like email traffic and calendar events, call recordings, and so on. But as you'd expect, when momentum starts to drop, when people stop engaging with your seller, it's a really good indicator that deal is on a path to close lost. So spending that time, what's really interesting is when we look at large organizations that have multiple territories, the territory that qualifies out the most is almost always the territory that's generating the most revenue.
Right.
So
I've always saw that as a sign of sales maturity to actually qualify out of stuff.
Well, but it's our role as leaders to give our sellers that authority to close off deals as lost, and to help them understand why that's going to help them win. And ultimately, when the data shows them, if you use the data to build pictures that an 11-year-old can understand, then all of a sudden the sellers start to understand why you're telling them to close deals off as lost, because ultimately they want to replicate what the best performers are achieving in the top territory.
Yeah. We are seeing a structural shift where AE headcount is surging by 32%, while SDR hiring has flatlined. Why is the sales pyramid turning into a diamond, and what does that mean for the next generation of sales talent?
That's a really good question. Well, what we're seeing is AI taking on a lot of the admin tasks that the BDRs used to be responsible for. So while we're not seeing the death of BDRs, we certainly saw the growth of them slowed down dramatically last year. And at the same time, we're seeing AEs taking on a lot more responsibility for top of funnel activity, because ultimately, and the results ring true. We see the pipeline that the BDRs are generating traditionally has a very, very low win rate and low deal values, while the pipeline that the AEs are self-sourcing is achieving really good, efficient outcomes. So the dollars per day that they're generating from their opportunities is great. And the reason for that is because incentives drive behavior, and BDRs are incentivized to book meetings, while AEs are incentivized to generate revenue.
Yeah. So you book loads of meetings. Doesn't mean that they go anywhere, but you book loads of them. Yeah. Forecast accuracy is sitting at a dismal 48% by week 2. You argue that this isn't a maths problem, but an execution problem. How does fixing the system behind the number lead to a 94% accuracy you highlighted?
Well, we've seen it time and time again, because we when we implement the platform, the revenue intelligence and the forecasting tools that we have, we build benchmarks for our customers. So when you go back through the historical deals that have closed, won, and lost, before you do the benchmarks, we have to fix those deals. Because when we look back at a deal from 6 months ago, it might only have 1 contact and 3 emails on the Salesforce record. But when we trawl through all the historical traffic, when we look for the mailboxes of not just the sellers, but the solution engineers, the support team, the finance department, and so on, we actually find that the buying committee might be 9 or 10 stakeholders, and that there were 250 interactions in a 5-stage sales process. And when we fix not just one deal, but the last, say, 1,000 deals, or every deal that we closed, won, and lost in the last year, patterns emerge. And we start to see what good looks like. And so what that does is it gives us a whole bunch of signals to use to forecast more accurately, rather than just what stage they happen to be in versus a conversion rate. And so that allows us to use all of these individual granular data points to actually give you a much more accurate forecast on what number you're going to hit, not based on hope, but based on the science.
To wrap up, you state that AI does not fix broken processes, it amplifies them. If a leader is looking at a report and feeling overwhelmed, what is the first step to shifting from insight to true revenue orchestration?
Well, as you rightly say, if you've got a broken go-to-market engine, then pouring AI on top of it is going to make that problem a whole lot worse. You're going to end up with all sorts of challenges. So it goes back to the basics. Get the rigor and process right. These salespeople, if you were to fast forward 3 years, what we're going to see, in my opinion, is a lot more orchestration, a lot more structure, a lot more process, where sellers have got a lot less wiggle room as to what they do at every stage of every sales cycle, even down to the point where the AI is telling them what to say next in real time on every call. And so when you have that process locked down, if you're very clear about what's expected at every stage and every call and every meeting, then all of a sudden we can use AI to actually accelerate that. So while the report talks a lot about broken systems are becoming even more inefficient with AI, the opposite is also true. right? If we get a lockdown, really high quality focused process, if we start to throw more fuel on that fire, suddenly it generates a whole lot more revenue for us as well.
So, Guy, before we finish, I know that you know the figures back to front and front to back. Have I missed anything?
Well, there's a lot, right? What I would say is we've recently launched a new service where we're giving companies the opportunity to benchmark or to show how they pace against those benchmarks. So without having to, commit to buying software, we've got a way of plugging in all your different data sources and showing you how your business is pacing against the benchmarks. And we produce a 50-page audit of the whole go-to-market motion. It goes back 4 quarters in the first report, and then every quarter we meet, we give the customer another set of data, and they get my time as well. So I get to sit with the leadership teams and show them how they're pacing and what they need to do to have an impact.
Okay. Guy, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your new report. Remind people where they can find the report.
Yeah, well, perhaps we can have a link to download the report.
There will be a link in the show notes for definite, yes. Where can we find you, Guy?
And once again,
San Francisco.
Yes, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and always happy to talk data, insights, and sales. So do reach out, and I look forward to having those conversations.
Excellent. Guy, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. I love the report. I always enjoy reading it when it comes out. So thank you for coming on and chatting about it as well.
Thanks, Tim. Take care.
Thanks.